So Michael Burry is betting on a big short on the semiconductors. So let's have a look at that one. So first off, read this disclaimer carefully. Then do your good deed of the day by liking and subscribing. So semiconductors, they are here. 65% from the 52-week low, basically at the highs. So they will be like the candidate for the current video. So semiconductors, like that. So the big news now, so let me just show you. So it is here. So yeah, Michael Burry is betting against Nvidia and other chip stocks. So let me zoom in a bit. So he bought put options with a notional value of $47 million against the iShares Semiconductor ETF, the SOXX. So that is definitively it's a pretty big bet. So let's look a bit at the semiconductors. So you do have the SMH, the semiconductor ETF. You also have the SOXX, which is the way to get the bearish exposure. Well, let's we might as well analyze this one. But the chart is more or less the same. So yeah, here it is. Weekly data points, long-term picture. So we do see that it is pretty close to the highs. Let's just measure a bit here. Yeah, 5%. To get like a full bar established high would be 9% higher. So all the things that are happening in artificial intelligence especially, it obviously is bullish for the semiconductors. However, it takes time to also make these semiconductors. And the question then is, okay, even though the long-term picture is very bullish, the way the market works is that it will be all based on future expectations. And that is how you could have a sector go down before the sales of the products have reached a temporary peak. And that is because the market is in a different time frame than the actual situation on the ground. So anyway, it is pretty high now. It's not at extreme levels yet, looking at the daily data points. So RSI is a bit stretched. Not extreme, but it's in dangerous territory on the RSI. Looking at the PPL, which measures the distance between price and the 20-point moving average. It's high, not terrifying high, but it's a bit risky. On the RSI on the weeklies, it's elevated, but not extreme yet. So from like a technical perspective, we could certainly go higher. We are, however, elevated when it comes to those risk factors like the RSI and the PPOs. So let's go into my notes. So let's actually take the SOXX in this case, SOXX. So we are overbought, but it's not like extreme. So in this case, I would give the technicals, I think I will give the BRs -4. It is elevated. So the bears have reasons to be a bit spooked, but not like outright terrified either. So it is high, but not extreme. If we look back at the housing market when Michael Burry, was bearish on that, he was relatively early. So he has a bit of a history of being a bit early. Then again, he has a bigger influence on the market now than he had back then. Hence, there could be that effect as well. Looking at the seasonality here for the semiconductors, to the left here, there is some bearish tendencies into 6th of December. Then there's a bit of a bullish phase into the beginning of next year. In the table view, so 15.3% gain so far for November. Now we're still, just in the middle of the November, so this is a pretty sizable move. This is Yeah, this is the third best November ever. So you could certainly make a case that we already have seen a pretty good move for November. So maybe that there's reason to be a bit cautious when it comes to future expectations here. If you are a bull, December, a rather mixed month. So like when you look here at the seasonality, I do think that, I lean a bit bearish. I will give the bears a -3 on this one, and that is simply because we already have seen a big move here for November. So it is pretty stretched. Next, we will look at the fundamentals. So XLK is the tech ETF, and SOXX like that. So now we are comparing semiconductors against, the broader tech space. Yeah, let's go here to performance. So year-to-date return, shockingly similar, almost identical, 47% here. Beta is higher for semiconductors. The yield is slightly higher, actually. Looking at holdings, yeah, do have a bit of a mix here. I mean, especially a mix in XLK, that is. Okay, so well, let's look also at the price earnings. So 20.3 here for the semiconductors and 34-ish for tech. So that is interesting. We actually do have a bit of a lower PE. To be clear, when you are, above the 20s, it's not exactly cheap. But that is interesting. Let's just quickly compare also against, let's compare, can do it like this, like Super Pros, SPY, and the XLK. So that is the S&P 500 against tech. Price earnings, so that is at 17.8. So you see that the tech space, it is significantly, it's more overvalued than what we see here in the S&P 500. Let's also just quickly also look at the QQQ. And then at the PE, 23.7, 22.7. So yeah, yeah, you could certainly make the case that there is some overvaluation here. I think I will give the bears. I give them a 2 here. I don't want to give them too much, given that we did see some interesting stuff when we compared the semiconductors against tech. Okay, so next we will look at relative performance. So let me do some changes here. And we get SOXX. So this is the one if you are feeling bearish. So when it comes to, potentially going bearish on the semiconductors, you could do it through the options market like Michael Burry. There are, I'm not entirely sure about the structure of his option trade. Most likely, if he just purely bought puts, he probably went, further out in time to offset, the theta decay effect. There are, of course, credit based option strategies where you can be bearish on the semiconductors while benefiting from time decay of options. You could, of course, also do the most basic thing is to just buy the SOXX. It's currently at, $10. No, actually, let's go on the dailies. So that is interesting. It's currently at, $8.39. So that's pretty cheap. Simple way to get exposure. The issue with leveraged ETFs is that they can have more substantial tracking errors if you hold them for like a longer period. But for like a trade, yeah, then they can work. And it's the cheapest way to get exposure. Okay. So long-term correlations between the SOXX and the S&P 500 at 90%, 93% with XLK, the tech ETF. When we look here at the bearish SOXX, 3 times negative leverage, minus 40%. So in that case, yeah, there is some significant divergence between the benchmark and the leveraged ETF. And you see that the divergence has actually increased. If you go back here in May, minus 74%, not too shabby. But there's been a deterioration. So that's a potentially an issue. Short term, we do have 93% positive correlation with S&P 500, 94% with the tech ETF, minus 95% here with SOXX. So that's interesting. You see that there's actually been an increase in the negative correlation over time. So so short term, it's been able to track better. So that's interesting. Okay. So let's now compare. So let's compare the XLK. No, let's SOXX with XLK. Like that. Okay. So let me just check something beforehand. Okay, everything is in order. So we are comparing them against each other. So it means that when the line goes down, it means that the blue line here, if it goes down, it means that the semiconductors underperform. Broader attack, if it goes up, it outperforms. Very sort of like in the neutral zone here on the RSI on price itself. There's not really like a pattern that jumps at me. Except maybe, let's have a bit of a look at that. Okay, maybe like that. There seems to be some major time cycles and potentially, let's see whether there are 2 small time cycles within. Yeah, there actually are some time cycle action here. There could be I mean, there is a current rising phase based on those time cycles that go into 6th of December. That's potentially interesting, and that would be SOXX as outperforming the XLK. So let's look at the seasonality. So based on the seasonality, then we do expect actually underperformance into the 6th of December. So there is actually a bit of a conflict here between time cycles and seasonality. Okay. Looking at the table view, in November so far seen a 4% outperformance from semiconductors. It's not actually yet on the higher end of the spectrum. December is usually a month where we see some underperformance from the semiconductors. January, more bullish than bearish, at least recently. So let's go into my notes. So when it comes to relative performance here from the semiconductors, I do think that the seasonality, it did suggest some potential underperformance. Time cycles, however, were more potentially bullish. A bit of a noisy thing here. Yeah, I will give a -2. So we do end up with -2.8 here in favor of the bears. The key thing is that we are just a bit overbought, but we're not really extreme yet. So I do think that this is an interesting bearish case. Having said that, I wouldn't be like a gigantic bear on this one, given the data we have. I think I will put on like a smaller bearish position with the like money that it's sort of like it's not like the wild card money, but more like the not high confidence trade. So I think this is an interesting one. For me, this one would work also as a bearish trade, simply because I have numerous bullish positions now in my overall portfolio. So I am looking for some bearish trades as well to sort of have a more market neutral portfolio. And that is something that you just have to be very like aware of when you are trading, is to look for that market balance, because something that could work for like a one trade um, in isolation um, does not necessarily work for like an overall portfolio, and the opposite is also the case. So in this case, yes, there is a thesis, even looking isolated, to go a bit bearish on the semiconductors. For me, in the overall portfolio, it makes actually a bit more sense, because it would going bearish, a sector that has a bit of a higher probability of going down, even if other parts of the market go up. So yeah, all in all, very interesting times ahead. Something I'm actually working on now is a GPT. So I am making various GPTs that can be very very beneficial for trading. One of them would be sort of like interactive trading journal. So that one is going to be really good. I will release that one. I will also release one that will do analysis, and it will be using the method that I currently have worked on, where you look at multiple factors. What is a bit challenging is to get GPT to collect the different types of data points. That's something I will have to work mostly on going forward. But I do think that working with artificial intelligence is going to be very interesting. So yeah, whatever you do, of course, have a great week ahead, and stay tuned for more.